I was never really a runner. The way I see running is a gift, especially when you have stage 4 cancer. I'm Anne. I'm running the Boston Marathon, presented by Bank of America. I run for Dana-Farber Cancer Institute to give people like me a chance to thrive in life, even with cancer.
Join Bank of America in helping Anne's cause. Give if you can at BofA.com/supportAnne. What would you like the power to do? References to charitable organizations is not an endorsement by Bank of America Corporation. Copyright 2025.
This episode is brought to you by Walmart. New beauty is in bloom at Walmart, and it's all about springtime radiance. From Drybar, Tula Skincare, and hundreds more available online, Walmart has the premium brands you want and this season's on-trend products for flawless, glossy hair and hydrated skin. Big name beauty brands? Check. The things you love? Check. Find trending spring beauty and all you need to look and feel gorgeous at Walmart, on app and online.
The Tudors Dynasty Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rebecca Larson, and today I'm very pleased to welcome to the show for the very first time, Paula Lofting. Welcome, Paula.
Hi. It's good to be here.
I'm so excited to talk.
I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you because today we're discussing a topic that I am very intrigued by, but don't know very much about it. And you have a book that is out or coming out soon called Searching for the Last Anglo-Saxon King, Harold Godwinson. Is it available now?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
It might not be in America, though.
Okay.
I think in America it's coming out at the end of April, maybe. I haven't checked recently, but because they always change the dates. But it's out in the UK and most other places, I think. I know somebody who's got it from Italy, so.
Oh, wonderful. Well,
So,
in the show
yeah.
notes, I'll include links where people can find the book as well. I want to talk about Harold Godwinson because he is so overshadowed by other people of that time period. And this is about bringing him to life a little bit. Why don't you give us a little idea of who he was and maybe where he came from?
Yeah, so he was the son of Earl Godwin, who was the son of a thane called Wulfnoth. And Wulfnoth was a very interesting character. He was known for burning the boats, the king's boats, in a fit of temper when he had an argument with his with one of the other guys who was commanding the fleet, and he got exiled. Anyway, Godwin sort of came back from exile and was given lands. The lands that Wulfnoth had been had removed from him because of his exile, and Godwin became very famous as King Canute's right-hand man, and he was given one of King Canute's relatives, a second cousin called Githa. Githa, let me try and say her, Thorkild's daughter, or Thorkild's daughter, as they would have said.
All these names are so challenging.
Yeah, very challenging, and especially when you're nervous as well. So they had this brood of, they ended up having how many boys? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boys and 3 girls, I think.
Wow.
So Harold had 5 brothers and 3 sisters, and he was the second born. And he was quite overshadowed at first by his older brother, who was called Sweyn, and he was the black sheep of the family. Sweyn was, but that's another story. We might talk about that a bit later, but we're talking about Harold now. So Harold became him and his brother Sweyn and foster brother called Beorn. They became earls within the reign of Edward the Confessor, who gave them the jobs because he kind of owed his position to Godwin, their father, who'd helped him sort of get back on the throne. Well, he'd never been off the throne, but he was the son of Athelred, the Unready, and he'd had to go into exile because Canute became king, and he didn't want any of Ethelred's, sons being around to challenge him. So Edward, who was known as the Confessor, not at that time, he wasn't, but later on he became sainted. So to distinguish him from any other Edwards, I might mention Confessor. So Edward came back to England in around 1042, and Godwin supported him. So to reward Godwin, he gave his sons earldoms, the ones that were old enough to have them. And he was expected to give the other boys earldoms as well when they were old enough. So the Godwinsons were quite a powerhouse of the 11th century. They were pretty dominant in the country, and Godwin was, at the time, he was Earl of Wessex, which meant that he was, as he had been Canute's number one Earl, he became Edward's number one. And so Harold was Earl of East Anglia, which is on the east of England, in that sort of lumpy bit that sticks out. I'm not very good at geography or topography. So East Anglia he was the Earl of, and that sort of covered the whole of Norfolk, Suffolk, and Essex, and Cambridge, and some of the Hertfordshire possibly. And then his older brother Sweyn, he was the Earl of Herefordshire on the east, South Midlands, on the border of Wales.
Okay.
And then you had Beorn, sort of in the Midlands as an earl. In Mercia, which was the Midlands, the bit below Northumbria, the bit below the north, and that was run by a man called Earl Leofric, and his wife was the Lady Godiva, who rode naked through the streets of Coventry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I immediately thought about Godiva chocolate, right?
Yeah. I think it's the same Godiva, but I don't think there was chocolate at the time.
Yeah, probably not.
So that was them. They ruled in the Mercia, and then we had the Northumbrians, who they were ruled by a man called Siward. He was Siward the Strong, who was quite old by this time. He was an old veteran of Canute's, so was a Dane.
Okay.
And the north was quite a difficult place to run. They're quite very assertive up there in the north, and they still are. I hope they won't mind me saying that. They call us the Southerners, and they actually called them that in the 11th century. They referred to the Southerners in England being soft, and they still call us that now.
Well, it's like was it Game of Thrones where they called the Northerners the wildlings?
yeah, because that's very much based, I think, influenced by our Northerners that lived back in the historical times. Yes, so this was England at the time. So I think I'm trying to create a picture of where Harold actually stood in amongst all that. And so he was very young when he became Earl of East Anglia. He probably wasn't much older than 18 or 19.
Oh, wow.
He could have been a bit older than that, but sort of maybe early 20s, but he's more likely, I think, to have probably been. I've recently placed his birth around 1025, where the older historians have always sort of pitched him at 1020, 1022, something like that. I'm pretty sure he was, the evidence that I've come up with and not just me as well, as evidence I've drawn on from other people, is that he was probably born around 1025, maybe 1024 perhaps. So he was quite young when he became Earl. So, and he would have been him and his brothers would have been learning the trade of being a statesman, a warrior, warlord, all those things that to prepare them in their youth for when they got older and had these kind of jobs, because the earls were one below the king. And you obviously had the top earl, which was Godwin. And when Godwin died, Harold took over from that. And the reason why it wasn't Sweyn, the older brother, was because he was dead by then.
Okay.
And yeah, and him being the black sheep of the family, he caused nothing but scandal throughout his life. He was quite young when he died, but yeah.
I'm interested in, I know you mentioned in your book Godwin as a kingmaker, which you see the parallels between the Wars of the Roses there, right?
Yeah.
Did Godwin have any influence to get his son closer to the throne?
No, I would say no, because Godwin died in 1053 and Harold didn't reach the throne till 1066. And it's difficult to know whether Harold was looking at the throne before then, or when it might have come to mind. I don't know that he did. There is no real evidence to sort of say, well, I think he was, actually going for the throne. Until much later, I think it's more likely to have been, and I may not have talked about this much in the book, but I think it wasn't until he went on that fatal trip to Normandy and ended up as hostage, really, with William. Don't know if you check that chapter out.
There's just so much interesting stuff about that time, because when we look at it, right, so Edward the Confessor, remind me now, because I'm getting confused with things. Did he name Harold as his successor, or did he not?
Well, according to the book that was commissioned by his sister Edith, who's the Queen, the book is the Edwardi Vita, or the Vita Edwardi, I think. Let's get them mixed around. He does at the when he's like dying, his last moments are that he pointed to Harold and said, I commend you, my kingdom, and my wife to you, to your hands to look after, basically. He never actually said, I want Harold to be king. Didn't actually point to Harold and say, I want you to be king. But also in a book like that, which was a hagiography, which was to sort of big up the Godwinson family. But unfortunately, it didn't start until 1065. They didn't start writing it until 1065. That's when it's generally thought to have started. And all of a sudden you have this like, the Godwinsons are now all dead. Oh, we can't really write about them anymore. So they are still in the book and they are bigged up, but it sort of then had to concentrate on, I think, sort of Edith, or the scribe who was writing for the book for her, sort of had to write about it in such a way that it didn't upset the new regime.
Yes, you have to be careful.
So in a sense, this death scene that was written in the book was really more about what might have happened if one was there to hear it, or this is how it went, sort of thing. And a lot of these big speeches and things that were given in those days in the books, like in the Carmen, William's speech and Harold's speech, they probably didn't happen. They probably didn't say the things that were said, but this is how the author wanted to get across. This is probably what they said, this is the kind of idea. So all those things aren't necessarily reliable, solidly reliable in the sense, but it's what we have as evidence.
Yeah.
So, and it's, I think he probably, I don't know, he's probably too ill to kind of, to have actually done that at the time, maybe. He might have done, I don't know. It's really difficult, but I think he was definitely elected king by the Witan. And that was the thing that mattered the most because, kings could not on their own appoint an heir to the throne.
Yeah.
They could, they suggest, they nominate. So if you were an atheling, you were, atheling meant throne worthy. So you could, if you were the son of a king, you could be throne worthy. You were an atheling. Edward didn't have any sons, so he had to adopt. The only appointed atheling at the time was a boy called Edgar, and he had to adopt him because he was his nephew, and he was the only one left who was the king's or direct descendant from Athelred. And so he was the actual atheling, but he was too young to become king.
Well, for those who are unfamiliar with this time, why is it that William the Conqueror, the Duke of Normandy at the time, of course, why was it he believed he was the new rightful king instead of Harold?
Have we got enough time?
Okay. How about the Cliff Notes version?
What's that?
The shortened, condensed version.
Right. Okay. There is none. There is no shortened version. No, I'll try and be brief. Okay. So he was Edward's cousin, second cousin, and that was the only link he had to England. He wasn't. And it wasn't a link at all. He had no blood link. He wasn't related to the line of the House of Cerdic, which was who they, the English kings were descended from. He had no connection with that whatsoever. He was a second cousin, through his great aunt, Emma of Normandy, and that's his only connection. And he probably decided, he was I think he was an expansionist. He was a Norman after all, and they did do a lot of that in Italy and other places. But I think he saw an opportunity in Edward being childless, as that he could possibly actually invite himself to be heir.
So he was never named heir.
Not officially, no. There is no official heir announcing thing.
Okay.
The only thing that we have, the only evidence we have is circumstantial evidence, and we don't even that's a bit sketchy.
Okay.
He was supposed to have come over. So there was a big brouhaha with the Godwinsons and King Edward in 1051. There was a big argument, and it almost came to blows, almost came to civil war. And Edward exiled the Godwinsons, all of them, and even his wife.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So whilst the Godwinsons were out of the country, William was very busy at that time. He had problems of uprisings in Normandy and on his borders, and he was trying to grab lands elsewhere. So he came over. I don't know how he got the time, but apparently he did. And he came over for a short trip. And most of what we know about that is in much later sources. But the only contemporary source that we've got is the D Chronicle in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, which was the Worcester Chronicle, and said that he came over for a time and then was given gifts and went back home again, sort of thing. Very, very brief stuff. Nothing said. Now, if he'd gone over there and Edward had said to him, "Okay, you can be my heir. You're the heir to the throne. I'll nominate you. We'll get you on the throne when I'm dead." It would have been written down somewhere. It would have been announced. It would have been something. And they had already been talking about trying to find Edgar Atheling, or rather Edward, who was Edgar's father, who was the son of one of the sons of Edmund Ironside. Are you following?
Yeah, I'm trying here. We're going.
Look straight at, keep your eye on me. So Edmund goes back to 1016. He died in 1016 fighting Canute. And he had two newborn sons that were whisked away to Europe for their safety. And they turned up in Hungary. And Edward, who was one of the babies, the other baby died younger, I think, and didn't exist by this time. So Edward had married into the Hungarian and the German, I think, royal families, or noble families, to a woman called Agatha, and they had children. So they came to England. They were only in England for 3 days, and Edward died.
Suspicious.
Yeah. His name was Edward Exile, and he died. And so Edgar, the little boy, was about 5 years old at the time, became nominated as, or Edward the Confessor had to adopt him so that he would be the son of a king.
Yeah.
And he then became the Atheling. So they were talking about, at this time, looking for this man in Hungary. Why would Edward, offer the crown to William, who wasn't of the blood of the English, or, and so that is one of the basis that William bases his claim on, that he was promised the throne by the king.
Interesting.
Okay. And to keep the thing short, because I could go on and on, it's all in the book. To keep it short, there were a few other things, and also blatant lies that the Normans wrote, and that they actually used after the Battle of Hastings to justify the killing, because actually he committed regicide, which was a very heinous thing to have done.
Yeah.
Only William could have got away with that. And he had to justify that by making his claim stronger. And he did that by saying he was promised. Now, I don't deny that there probably could have been some sort of conversation between, and a visit. It could well have been a visit in 1051. But I think that what was probably discussed was a partnership between Normandy and England to stop the Vikings from raiding, rather than, anything else. If William had got it into his head then that, they might have had a conversation, he might have said, well, you can always think of me if you don't have a son of your own. He might have William, Edward at the time needed William on side, might have said something like, "Hey, I'll have a think about it," or something. But Edward would have known that it was not in his gift to give William the crown. It just was, they had to be approved by the Witan.
Right.
The council of the time. So
yeah, and history is written by the victors, right?
Exactly, is perfect example.
Yes, it is. Okay, so let's go back now. Edward the Confessor dies. Harold Godwinson is elected king. He has a coronation. Is he the first king to have a coronation at Westminster?
Sorry, are we talking about William?
No, I'm going back to Harold now.
So Harold, sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, I was thinking ahead. Yes, I suppose he was. Yeah, suppose he was at that in the new church that had been built, because that one Edward had been building that for many years, and he did live to see it consecrated. But Harold was the first one in there. Yeah,
I think that's fascinating. Having been to Westminster, when you walk in, you just feel the history there, don't you?
Oh my gosh! Did you see the death masks and that?
No, I am so upset. So we went there, and I'll keep this brief. I went there. I spent one day in London, and by the time I got to Westminster, I had yet to eat for the day, and it was like 2:00 in the afternoon. And I got around the main floor, looked at a bunch of tombs, and suddenly started feeling nauseous because I hadn't eaten all day. And so I ended up leaving Westminster before I got to see all the cool things that were like upstairs, I think, like the effigies. And I missed all that.
Yeah, I think they were upstairs, or maybe on the side somewhere.
Yeah, I missed it. I'm so when I go back, I'm going to visit.
Time you come, do you come every year?
Well, that's my plan now.
Oh, wow. We must meet.
Yes, I'm hoping to be there in September this year. So that's the next plan. And of course, when you do it, you always try to set up an itinerary on how many things you can reach and look at during the time period that you're there.
Well, I'd like to show you that Abbey.
I would love that. I would absolutely love that. Yeah. Okay, so we're at the point now. We're kind of jumping back in time, right? So Harold Godwinson has now had his coronation. He is now the king. And he didn't rule very long before he was killed, but what kind of king did he show us to be during this time?
So there's lots been written about his character. He was very charismatic, very affable, lots likable. He was liked by no one. Seems to have had a bad word against him before 1066 and before the Normans started writing about him. He was supposed to be very tall, handsome, and he was just everything that you could want in a king, really, if you were a queen as well. And so as a king, he took the throne up, and he knew that there was going to be a lot of trouble. The winds were blowing from Norway, that his brother Tosti was going to be invading with Hardrada, so he knew that they were a threat. There was the threat of William as well, which he knew that William was going to hit the roof because he'd promised him under coercively that oath. He was forced to do that, more or less, because to save his own life and that of the people with him. And he knew that William was going to go mad, and he had to have his wits about him. He needed to get people on side who might have been offside with him, like the Northerners. They hadn't actually given their oath to him, so I suspect that there was some contention there. I think they wanted Edgar on the throne. And also the Mercian earls were in charge of both the North and Mercia as well now. And their father had always been, at odds with the Godwinsons. So so the first thing he did was to make sure that there were the defences were of the coast were seen to, that he had men stationed there, garrisons on on the coast. And he then went up north to parley with the Northerners, and came back with a new wife. So he married the sister of the Northern Earls, Edwin and the other one was Morcar, and he married their sister. So that firmed that up. So he did that, which was quite a smart move, really. Quite sad for his long-term wife, Edith, but that's what they did in those days. And then he did some admin stuff. He was signing charters and sorting out land grants and things. So he was very effective in that way. He got on the job very quickly and made sure that that the country was secure. So I think he and I think he might have changed. They said about him making sure that laws were there to protect people, like any law breakers were punished and that sort of thing. But I think that was quite the sort of thing they would throw in there anyway.
Sure.
This is what you did when you were a king. So yeah.
He was kind of in a tough situation, wasn't he? Because he has his brother coming to invade from Norway, and he's got William down in Normandy.
Yeah.
Help me remember, did William know about the Norway invasion?
There is evidence to say that he might have done, that Tosti was probably doing a bit of a number on both of them, actually. Mm-hmm. I think he was trying to, he'd gone to William to try and get him on side. And William apparently had said, okay, very sort of kind of almost dismissively, saying, well, you go and start the ball rolling, sort of thing. And there are other chronicles that say that he said, on your way, kind of thing. And then, either way, I think Tosti was, could possibly have tried to eliminate. I think he wanted England for himself. He might have wanted England for himself. I'm not saying for definite he did. So he would want to get rid of William and Harold and Harold Hardrada as well.
Yeah.
But Hardrada was his best bet, really, because with Hardrada, he offered him to, work with him in England if he gave him land and that sort of thing, that he would be his number two. And he said the same sort of thing to William. Mm-hmm. So he was playing both, but I think he didn't count on Harold actually winning the Battle of Stamford, where he died as well. So that put paid to his plan.
Yes. Well,
it's possible that William would have known. I do think that by the time he got to England, because he landed in England when Harold was still in the north, so by then he would have known. Yeah.
Yeah, and Harold's fighting these battles in the north, and I'm sure his army is a little depleted from fighting. And then William, Duke of Normandy, lands on English soil, and now he's got to go fight him.
I know, because he thought he wasn't coming.
Right. So it was a good distraction.
He's not likely to come in October. September is like the season's usually over, and the winds that year had been completely wrong, and they couldn't make it over. And I think Harold was just hoping that he wasn't coming. and if he wasn't coming in 1066, the likelihood of him coming in 1067 would be even less.
Yeah.
So, but he totally miscalculated and
Right.
misjudged William's determination.
Yeah. So William gets there and they end up having the Battle of Hastings where Harold is murdered, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Battle of Hastings a little bit, because William came over and he had a decent sized army with him, didn't he?
Yeah. I mean, they talk about enormous amounts of like 60,000 men and things like that. They absolutely embellished the number in some of the chronicles on either side as well. But they reckon probably 10,000 aside.
Yeah.
Could have been, and probably not all of those would have been, warriors. They might have been the people that sort of looked after the horses, or kind of pulled the wagon, loads of equipment, and because William brought over castles, things already made, or not ready made exactly, but flat packed.
Wow.
And it's incredible. I have to give William his due. He was amazing. He was an amazing man.
Yes.
He did that. What he did was just incredible, and I will honor him that. That's all.
So let's talk about how Harold died, right? Because I feel like the story is always he died with an arrow through his eye or something to that effect. Is that true or not? Do we know?
I don't believe it's true. I don't think that happened at all. I think he was because the earliest source we have for the battle is the Carmen, which was probably written in the first 6 months of 1067, so not long after the battle itself. And this guy who wrote his name is Guy, Guy of Amiens. He would have had relatives that fought in the battle, who would be able to tell him what happened. And his version of the death of Harold is that he was hunted down by a hit squad, including William and 3 other French nobles. I'm trying to think. Gifford was one. Somebody called Gifford. Hugh of Poitiers or Poitou, who Poitou. Oh gosh, I can't remember now. I'll have to look in my book.
I wouldn't even know
and
if
another
you're
guy
saying
as well. Probably Walter someone.
It's the names during that time too. I'm like, don't even ask me to pronounce them. I'm not even going to try.
Yeah, especially the Anglo-Saxon ones were worse, I think, to pronounce. But
yes.
And I'm pretty sure they don't actually pronounce the way they're written. But
right. I have a question for you, because I feel like this is the obvious question: is why do you think Harold Godwinson is so often overshadowed by William the Conqueror?
I don't think he is now. I think the Victorians sort of revived him.
Those Victorians.
Yeah. There was a big revival of Anglo-Saxon stuff in the Victorians, and I think, but I think he's overshadowed more by other kings of England, because he in England at one time, it was taught in schools that royalty started from William the Conqueror, and they used to ignore the Anglo-Saxons at one point. So that all changed, later. But I think but sometimes it's easier to start the royal line the English royal line from William, because the other lots weren't connected to William, maybe.
Yeah.
And also there were still people whose ancestors might have been Norman, came over with the Normans in 66, and they were sort of talking about what the Normans did for us, sort of thing. A bit like, well, the Romans did all these good things. Normans brought, beautiful architecture, as if we didn't have any of that, as if the Anglo-Saxons didn't have any of their own. I try to avoid saying we because I wasn't there at the time, but I kind of, I suppose being English, I like to own the Anglo-Saxons.
Yes, I would.
But I also own, it's all part of our history. I still own the later stuff as well.
Yeah.
I'm not totally obsessed. But yeah, so I think that's probably right. I think he's more likely to be overshadowed by the other kings that came after him because he comes from a different era. He comes from, and I guess Alfred the Great gets more of a better deal than he does because Vikings, I suppose. I don't know really.
Yeah. Well, it's all about drama too in history, right? We're attracted to the drama. Alfred had to fight the Danes, so there's a lot of excitement there.
Yeah. But actually, in the 11th century was really, the stories that you can write about different people's stories and what the women went through and that kind of, there's a lot of like very sort of prominent women at the time who get a bit of a mention. Anglo-Saxon times, they did often mention women, but not as much as we would have liked them to. But of course, later on, the Anglo-Saxon women did have more privileges, did have far more, respect, I think. They could go to court on their own, bring the suits to court. They could own their own property. They could gift their property to whoever they wanted. There was a lot more. They could even divorce if they wanted to.
Wow. Yeah, that's very different than the Tudor times.
Yeah. The Welshmen, in Wales, I think a woman could divorce her husband if he had bad breath.
Oh.
So...
Well, that's a fun little thing.
Interesting times. But yes, and women were there were quite a lot of powerful women in Anglo-Saxon era, especially the abbesses, and they could be very powerful. They were often in charge of the male side of the abbeys. The abbess would be over the abbot.
Oh.
And they would be responsible for educating the men and that sort of thing. So they could be very powerful. And particularly Queen Emma was quite powerful. Canute's other wife, Elphaba, she was very powerful as well. Alfrith, who was Athelred's mother, she was a very powerful woman indeed. So yeah, lots of really good stories and, passion and, blood.
I love it.
Blood feuds, battles and, and love and passion. And
yeah, it's just such an intriguing time in history.
Yeah.
I guess, Paula, my last question for you today is going to be, if you could dispel one myth about Harold, what would it be?
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Switch to Verizon Business and get more from your internet without paying more for your internet. Get LTE Business Internet starting at $39 a month when paired with select business mobile plans. That's unlimited data, and with it, unlimited possibilities. Start saving today with Verizon Business, ranked #1 in small business internet customer satisfaction by J.D. Power. Starting price for 25 megabits per second LTE internet plan with smartphone plan savings, plus taxes, fees, and economic adjustment charge. Terms apply. For J.D. Power 2024 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
That he was a usurper. Well, it's not necessarily a myth, but a lot of people see him as usurping the throne from William, and that he wasn't any of those things. I don't think a lot of people think he really was now. I think there's a lot of difference in the consensus of his character now, but there still are people who do believe that he was a bad one.
Sure.
And he was the wrong one, and that William was the good one. And the arrow in the eye.
Yes.
So you've got a few there. You never get one with me.
Well, Paul, I've really enjoyed talking about this period in history with you. And if somebody is interested in getting your book, where can they find it?
Everywhere, really. It's on Amazon, of course. One thing I do like to say, for anyone who's listening is living in England, there is a fantastic bookshop called the Bookshop in East Grinstead, and it's run by it's owned by John Pye, and he is very, very supportive of indie writers, traditionally published writers and historians, and I would truly recommend that you go to his website and order books from the online bookshop, because you would be helping on these indie bookshops that are struggling to stay alive or stay open, I should say, maybe. So it would be really, and also the authors get a cut and you get a discount as well.
Nice. I'll be sure to include a link for that as well for everybody. And if anybody has some questions after listening to this episode, how can they reach you, Paula?
I have a website, and it's called threadstothepast.com. And there's all sorts of things on me, on there, I should say, about me and my books, and lots of articles about the Battle of Hastings, and lots of other stuff as well.
Yeah.
Hopefully
Are you on social media?
Yes, I'm on Instagram and X, Blue Sky, what's the other one? Threads.
Yeah, Facebook.
I'm on there. So yeah, I'm on most of it. I don't think I'll do anymore. I'll keep up with it all. But on my website as well, there is a link where you can click to buy my books as well. But I haven't put the Harold one on there yet.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Paula, thank you so much.
Work out how to do it.
You'll get there. Thank you so much, Paula, for coming on the show today and sharing your vast knowledge of history with me.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that concludes another episode of the Tudors Dynasty podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you love the show and would like to show your support, consider becoming a patron over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Tudors Dynasty. Over there, you'll get commercial-free episodes, early access, and some patron-exclusive content as well. If you would prefer to show your support in another way, head on over to my website, tudorsdynasty.com, and click on the shop to see some of the new merchandise that I have available. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.